Amen. The Lord reminds us to remember Him. How can we forget? How can we forget, especially this season? Today we'll be participating in the Lord's Supper, so at the end of the service, wanted to just welcome Thomas Rojas' family. It's good to see you, hermana. Hermana, remember when he first came, and those of you who remember Thomas Rojas, the family, and we've been praying for you. And so then when he told us the news that he had cancer, it was difficult. And so and then when we heard the news that he had passed away, but our prayers are with you all, hermanos. It's good to see you. God bless you. Wonderful husband and son. And so we were just pleased to have known him during this time. So God bless you. The rest of you, welcome. We're glad that you are here. Just a reminder, business meeting, 2 weeks at 10 o'clock. It'll be just to approve the finance or the budget, the budget meeting. And so that'll be Sunday school, 10 a.m. Should be a very short meeting. And so just to put it on your schedule. We're continuing with the life of Joseph. If you see Joseph there, he's the one with the sad face, I would imagine. We talked about he never said a word. The Bible, obviously he said words, but Bible is never recorded of saying any words. Quiet guy. And we don't hear too many messages about Joseph. And never mentioned once as far as saying any words. So turn your Bibles to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 13 and 15, and we'll get started on that. But once again, it's just great to be here in the house of the Lord. The Christmas season, it's the most wonderful time of the year. We're coming down to the final days. Next Sunday will be Christmas Eve, and so we invite you to come, make plans, get caught up with your shopping and everything, and so be here bright and early. So again, welcome everybody. And as we talk about heroes, I don't know who your heroes were maybe growing up. I know that people who meant a lot to you usually will say our dad or someone in the family. But we've been looking at Joseph as one of those unsung heroes, one of those unlikely heroes that out of nowhere they become heroes. And so, we know of heroes that are well known, but here out of nowhere we have an unexpected hero. Some of you have seen Schindler's List. You remember this man who was unfaithful in a sense to his wife. He was an alcoholic. He was crooked. Not much of a person. Didn't have a very good character. Yet he does something that is so heroic, so unbelievable, so courageous that they even made the movie about Schindler's List or Schindler. Unlikely hero. What did he do? He saved 1,200 lives, Jewish lives. 1,200 Jewish lives. If you haven't seen the movie, I encourage you to go watch it. He spent his entire fortune. He went bankrupt, bribing Nazi authorities to protect the Jews who worked at his factory. Think about this. Unlikely hero, in spite of his character, in spite of who he was, he becomes a hero. Today, Jews revere him. This man. And so now we look at another man who is also a hero, but he has a character that's totally different. He has a good character. He's a good man. But he is also a very unlikely hero. If it wasn't because of Jesus, you and I would have never known who Joseph was. And so, again, his name, Joseph. When you think about when God came 2,000 years ago, And what God asked of Joseph, imagine yourself being Joseph. Put yourself in his shoes. You're a young man. You've got all your life ahead of you. You've planned it out. You've chosen, or in reality, your parents have chosen this beautiful bride for you, a young girl by the name of Mary. You love her, she loves you. You've got a job, you're a carpenter. You'll get married, you're going to have children, maybe little Joseph and Mary Josephine or something like that. And your life is planned out. You're going to live happily ever after, right? And then this angel shows up. This angel shows up and says to Joseph, by the way, God's going to send his son to become a human being. Mary is a virgin and she will remain a virgin. But this baby will be fully human. And Joseph, here's the good news. God has chosen you to marry, to be Mary's husband. And you are to be the father. The better news is I've chosen, or God has chosen you to be the father. Imagine yourself, put yourself in Joseph's shoes. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're given this great responsibility. Now, let's imagine there was no Joseph. And God asked you be the angel, and asked you to pick someone to be the father of the Son of God. Who would we pick? You and I would not have chosen Joseph. We would not have given Joseph a second chance or a second look. Joseph, a minimum wage carpenter, really a nobody, living in a nothing town called Nazareth. And he is called to raise the Son of God. Now, we all love Cinderella stories, right? We see a lot of the Bible. It's basically always the underdog, always not the big or the loud people that get chosen. You see the apostles, you see the people that God uses. You would think that he would have used the Jewish Pharisees and leaders in the religious world, or would have picked someone out of the Roman Empire to become. I mean, you look at Moses, and when God wanted someone to rear Moses, there he goes to Egypt, where Pharaoh's daughter takes him in. And he has the best of education. He has the best of everything. And you figure something like that, but not with Jesus. And so, you're looking for a man who would be the best type of father for the Son of God. Someone who would be able to call him dad. Dad. Someone who would make sure that this little boy grows up to have the best so that he can become what he's supposed to become, the Son of God. And so, most of us would have looked for someone other than Joseph. And so maybe Joseph or this baby is going to become the Son of God. Yes. This baby that we're talking about that Mary's going to have, he's going to be one of the Trinity. Yes. And if you're Joseph, you're thinking, wow, the Son of God. So yes, celebrity status that a lot of us would be looking for. Someone successful to look up to. Somebody wealthy to provide. Someone powerful. Someone influential. After all, this is not just any other baby. There's never, ever been a baby born like this baby was going to be born. And There has never been another baby born in this world like this baby Jesus. And so, in a sense, Joseph, we're trying to pick the cream of the crop here. Somebody that's going to put him in a good home. Someone that will put him in a safe neighborhood. Give him the finest education that any child could have. And if God had had our mindset, given the best, He certainly would not have chosen Joseph. But He did. And He did have the mindset different than ours. He knew better. You look at when God got the disciples, again, those were not the cream of the crop. And so, Joseph did not have a pedigree, did not have a degree, wasn't wealthy, didn't have this reputation of business-wide or whatever. Just an ordinary, blue-collar, minimum wage worker, ordinary, run-of-the-mill, dime a dozen, Jewish man. And yet all we know of him is what God or the Bible says about him, because he never said a word. And so, this is who has been chosen. And yet, this is the third sermon on Joseph this month. This Christmas season. From somebody that never spoke a word. Minimum wage carpenter who nobody knew. Never says a word in the Bible. Why? Why would God pick Joseph? Only one reason: fully surrendered. He was fully surrendered to the will of God, regardless of the cost. Regardless of the cost, fully surrendered. And so what God does for people, for all the Josephs of the world, who are willing to do whatever God wants them to do, He can do for any of us. For me, you, everybody. And it's easy to say, but I'm a nobody. Well, in God, there are no nobodies. We're all, in a sense, nobody's trying to tell somebody or everybody about somebody. That's Jesus. But there are really, in God's vocabulary, there are no nobodies. And so, when we say, I'm a nobody, well, welcome to the club then. Welcome to the club. He specializes in nobodies. And so, it doesn't matter who we are. Joseph had no PhD, no college degree, no seminary. He wasn't rich. There was no title found before his name or after his name. All he was surrendered to the will of God. And so that's what we can be, surrendered to the will of God. And so as we look at the last time that Joseph is mentioned by name in the Bible, we'll turn to the first gospel in the book, part of the Christmas story. And it's part of the Christmas story we rarely talk about. We talk about, in Luke, but here the last part, we don't really talk much about this part, which we're going to read in a little bit. It's a part of the Christmas story, but we don't sing much about this part of the Christmas story. There's not a whole bunch of pictures of this part of the story. No mention in the Christmas plays. We typically overlook it, and yet it's such a great end to the story. This story of a great man that lived. So this lesson we learn from Joseph. When we surrender to God's call, we are under God's care. When we surrender to God's call, we are under His care. Now, just to remind you, Joseph never had it easy. He never had it easy. Think about this. He did not ask for this. God never promised him a rose garden, a perfect road, no potholes, no pain. Joseph paid a high price to be the father of Jesus. But because Joseph was willing to do it, when God called him, can you imagine? He calls him on the phone and says, he's already saying, yes, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And because he did that, we're going to learn three things, which is true about Joseph, which can be true of any of us. And so, fully surrendered to the will of God. So the first thing that we have to understand is we are guided by the providence of God. Guided by the providence of God. One of the joys of getting older, if there are anything great about getting older, is that we can look back at our lives and as you see things, how God began to move pieces together. You begin to see how God has worked in your life. And you begin to see how it all worked out. Those moments when you did not know what to do. And you can look back and realize that wasn't an accident. That was not a coincidence. We just go, wow. It's God. It was God moving all the pieces on the board the whole time. I remember some of the tough decisions. To go to Monterrey to go to college over there. Then to go to Laredo. And I remember Juan Laredo, one of the biggest, Juan Laredo of all places, Yet came the day when I made my way back home with 3 Laredoans and a dog. 3, my wife and my daughters. And I could see. Now it's easy to see from this perspective. But if anything of life you see, and you see God moving the pieces of the board the whole time. And so, as we go back to the beginning, just like all of us, Joseph had a plan for his life. He was about to get married to Mary. He would be faithful to her. He would be a good, hard-working carpenter. He's thinking, I'm going to get married to this wonderful, beautiful young girl who loves God also. We're going to have kids. We're going to have a family. We're going to have a quiet life. Everything will be fine. But then came the baby. The baby gets in the way of their life, or at least in a way. That wasn't, one thing is to have your own baby, but this one is not even your baby. And you remember the story. Joseph wants to do the right thing. He could have had Mary stoned because that's what it called for. He wants to do right beside her though, so he says, I'll just quietly divorce her. I don't want to harm her. I don't want to have any problems or troubles. I know there's something here, I just don't get it. But I don't want to put Mary in unnecessary shame. So not only the baby comes, but now this dreams. He begins to have these dreams. Gets in the way. God tells Joseph through an angel in this dream, Joseph, don't be afraid. Don't be troubled. I want you to take Mary as your wife. So he's starting to, okay, it's an angel speaking to me. But another thing gets in the way, as if that's not enough. Now the government gets in the way, and they order a census to be taken. Now Joseph is going to have to take Mary, a woman who is 8.5 months pregnant, on a 70-mile trip to Bethlehem. Again, 70 miles from here to Falfurria is more or less 70 miles, right? And it's going to take about a week. But she's pregnant on a donkey. What husband does that to a wife? But he's only following God's order because there's a census and they've got to register there. But really, because the Bible had prophesied that they would have the baby in Bethlehem. So, Joseph, they go back to this place. And as they're going, taking the 70-mile trip to Bethlehem, the worst of it, when they get there, no rooms available. No rooms available. Holiday Express booked. The Marriott, the Hilton, Super 8. They didn't even leave the light on for them, right? No place. So now he has to take Mary to a cave and gives birth to this baby boy. Now they stay for about 2 years. They stay for about 2 years there, where Joseph probably had some family, because obviously they went back to where their original families were from. So he has some family. Of course, he went through probably some questions about this young girl whom he was not married to, but pregnant. He probably found work and probably said, you know what, Bethlehem is a nice place to raise a family. So they stay there. And you get used to it just like anything else. And those of you that have lived in different places, you get used to it and say, you know what, I can live here. Small community. Everybody knows your name. We'll stay here. Good schools, good families. We can stay. And then Joseph begins to think, you know what, the worst is really over. The worst is behind us. What else can go wrong, right? Then he has another dream. And his dreams are now becoming nightmares. So let's take a look at the verse, Matthew 2:13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Just when you think the worst is over, and look at the next part, stay there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Okay, so it's not over yet. We're told that we're not told what Joseph said because Joseph never said a word, at least that we know of from the Bible. He never speaks, he never responds. So what would we say? Yeah, you gotta be kidding, right, Lord? Another problem? Or maybe you were getting tired of all this and sometimes people get upset. You could have just said, you know what, God, I didn't ask for this. I did not ask for this. That baby is not even mine. I didn't ask to go to Bethlehem to take Mary on a 70-mile trip, but I said okay. I didn't ask to be his dad, but I said okay. Could have been, but this was not Joseph. That's not Joseph. Might have been one of us. But not Joseph. He just said, okay. He said, I get it. So they're there for 2 years. Maybe by now he's got a job. His family is there. Bethlehem, 2 years. He began to like the situation. Now, tells him to go to Egypt. Right? And yeah, one of us, could have been us, said, why not Cancun, or why not Acapulco, Bahamas, or even New York City, whatever, but Egypt. What good can come out of Egypt in a sense, right? A place he's never been, a place to people he doesn't know. And again, you want me to put my wife, and now this baby now is 2 years old, and you want me to take this baby, 2-year-old baby, with my wife, another 70 miles on the desert. And for what? If it was some of us in the 20th century, we could say, you know what, I want to renegotiate my contract. This is not what I signed up for. Not what I expected. I don't want to do it anymore. So we learn a couple of lessons about Joseph. One of them is about following God. We can learn things about following God from Joseph, and we can learn a lot about God by how he works in Joseph's life. And so sometimes we get this idea that if I become or I give my life to Jesus, it's going to be easy. All my problems will be over. Following Jesus is going to be the easiest thing to do. Just give my life to Him and all of my problems will be solved. Good news and bad news. The good news, yes, God will solve a lot of those problems. The bad news, you're going to get a whole bunch more. That's life. But listen, if you don't have Christ, you're still going to have problems anyway. And you're still going to be, and they're probably going to be worse. So you pick problems, you're going to have them either way. But it's so much better when God is working them out for you than you trying to figure them out for yourself. And so, the right thing to do. And following Jesus is not always smooth, right? It's not, everything's clear sailing or smooth sailing. So if we want an easy life, if we're looking for a life of no conflict and no confrontation, just live and let live, then yeah, you probably shouldn't want to surrender your life for Christ. That's what you're looking for. But if you're serious about the Lord, then you know that some of our plans will be disrupted. You know that, right? Some of those hopes will be discarded. Some of those expectations will become disappointments. Because Jesus never overpromised and He never underdelivers. Jesus is always upfront and honest with us. If anyone wants to come after me, He says, great. Let him deny himself. Let him take up your cross and follow me. So, to follow Jesus, it's going to cost to serve Jesus. But it pays to serve Jesus. And it always pays more than it costs. We get scared with the pay part, but you don't see the blessings. Because we've been told it's going to cost you a lot. You're going to have to give up all this. You're going to have to give up your dreams. You're going to have to give up all. Whatever you're giving up, nothing compares to what Jesus has for us. So here we are again. Joseph is asked once again. He moved from where he was in Bethlehem, or Nazareth to Bethlehem. Now he's being asked to pull up his stakes again and now go to Egypt. Okay? Gather his belongings and get his donkey and get his frequency donkey riding miles, right? Been traveling quite a bit on these donkeys. Travel to places he's never been. Live with people he doesn't know. And Joseph may not have understood it at the time, but as you look back, I'm sure he realized he's under the providence of God. And those of you that have been following God for a long time, yeah, you find out we're under the providence of God. God is providing where He provides. He guides. And so, being guided by God's providence, he knows that God is in charge. He knows Herod has nothing to do with this. He knows Pilate has nothing to do with what's going on, or the Pharaohs, or the high priest. He knows God is in charge. God is running the show. God is governing over the affairs of men. Even today, He is governing over the affairs of men. So the question, why did God choose Egypt? Of all places. Was it just the luck of the draw? Flip a coin? Paper, sock, or scissors? What happened? Just finger fell on Egypt? You know why God sent Joseph to Egypt? Because before he was born, Mary or Jesus, God had made a prediction, a prophecy long time ago. And we find it in Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt, I called my son. Out of Egypt, I called my son. So here, writing to the Jews, points this out. Matthew, look at Matthew. Matthew 2:15. Where he stayed until the death of Herod, and so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So why did Joseph have to go to Egypt? Again, all due to the providence of God. What does that mean? Doesn't really matter what's going on in our life, in our world, things around us. Everything is going according to God's plan, what He wants to do in us. He's trying to work in our lives if we'll let Him, if we'll allow Him to. And that's what happens when we surrender to God's will. We are under God's care. Second thing, we're guarded by His protection. We're guarded by His protection. You know why we're safe today? Why we're alive today? God's protection. We're here because God has protected us. Now, there will come a time when God will do better than just protecting us. He'll take us home to be with Him forever. But in the meantime, we're not here by luck or fate or by chance. We're being guarded by the protection of God, by the providence of God. Providence, when you look at providence, means before, and video means to see. God always looks ahead. God already knows our future. He knows what is coming. And God already knew what was going to happen in Bethlehem. Herod was about to order that kids, little boys under the age of 2, would be killed. God already saw that. And so, God's already ahead of it. What does God do? Once again, He talks to Joseph in another dream. Now, I know in today's world we can't always rely on dreams to find out what's going to happen. A lot of those dreams, we just had too much pizza or something at night. But here Joseph has another dream. And Joseph, you'll take Mary and Jesus to Egypt. Why? Herod was doing everything he could to find Jesus and kill Him. Herod, crazy guy, paranoid, had over 10 wives, many children, and he was always worried that his kids would usurp his authority. Always concerned about somebody in the family would do something. And he was always afraid that the Jews would rise up against him. So he hated the Jews. He was crazy. And he killed Jews for no reason whatsoever. He taxed them. Always fearful of losing the throne. This is Herod. The same Herod that the wise men came when they were looking for the child where he was born. And the wise men asked, hey, where can we find the king of the Jews? They asked him. And that's who he was. He's the king of the Jews. Right? He's saying, I am the king. I am him. Why are you looking for the king of the Jews? And he's saying, when I'm the king of the Jews. Thinking, well, I don't know who this king of the Jews is. But whoever you guys think it is must be killed immediately. No one is going to take my position. He had killed many, including many in his family. Look at Matthew 2. Matthew 2:16. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. Ever seen somebody so furious like that? And he gave orders. Look at the orders. Kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under. 2 years and under. So, this Herod, no problem for him killing babies. History tells us that Bethlehem maybe had about 20,000 people during this time. He had no problem killing the babies 2 years and under. Didn't worry. The problem is, Herod did not know that God had beat him to the punch again. And so God relocates Jesus before he committed the act. Again, Jesus is being guided by providence of God, guarded by the protection of God. So God says, Joseph, get up, don't delay, take your family to Egypt. Perfect place. Why? Why would this be a perfect place? Why Egypt? Because this was a Roman province, but it was outside of Herod's jurisdiction. So, and there was about 1 million people, 1 million Jews living in Egypt during this time. 1 million. You remember back then also when the Jews were living in Egypt? And so they welcomed the family. You're one of us. We'll take care of you. No problem, no trouble. So the question, if God is powerful, why even go to Egypt? Why don't you just take care of Herod right there and then, right? Why do we have to go through Egypt? Just zap him. Get rid of this guy. But no, that's not the way God did it this time. We're guarded by the protection of God as we take responsibility for our actions. Yes, we have a responsibility. Is God concerned about our health? Yes. But He also wants us to go see doctors and get checked. Does God heal? Of course. But He also gives us hospitals and medications as His tools. So God provides places to go and hide. And God provides everything we always need. But so there is God's part, and then there is our part. Our part, or Joseph's part, is go to Egypt. And so he did. He went to Egypt. That's the way out. Take it when God calls. And then, the last point, we're graced by the provision of God. Without hesitation, let's go to Matthew 2:14. Without hesitation, look at Matthew 2:14. It says, so he got up. This is wonderful. This Joseph is just a wonderful guy. He got up, took the child and his mother during the night. He didn't even wait. Most of us would have said, no, not right now. They didn't wait during the night and left for Egypt. Again, what was Joseph's part? Go to Egypt. That's the way out. Take it. So during the night, they left. And we know that he's going to a place where there are Jews. Again, that 70-mile trip. A few days maybe to get there, maybe a week. And he must find a place to stay. Now he's thinking about, okay, how am I going to do it? I need a place. I need to provide food and shelter for my wife and my son. How am I going to do it? He's not wealthy. He's not rich. He's living paycheck to paycheck. How did he have the means to make the trip in the first place? Need money to live, right? How would they survive in the trip and then day to day when they get there? You need a job. You need food. You need a roof. You need to get resources. But you remember just before this dream, a week or so before, wise men from the east show up and they come to worship the newborn king. Matthew 2:11. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary. They bowed down and they worshiped him. They knew who he was. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So look at this. The question. We know the story. Why did they bring those gifts? Most of us have seen that cartoon out there that says, had it been wise women, and you see the women bringing the gifts to the baby Jesus, and they're bringing diapers and formula, had it been wise women, right? But in this case, they're about to make a trip to Egypt. Where are they going to get the money? Where are they going to find money? Well, these gifts that they bring are fit for a king. About a pound of frankincense would have been worth about $500 a pound. A pound of myrrh would have been worth about $4,000. A pound of gold would have been worth about $600. This wise man, see a star. God says, follow that star. They go to Bethlehem. They bring these gifts. They present the gifts. And you're Joseph, and how are we going to use these gifts? What kind of gifts are you giving, right? But God says to Joseph, go. Take Mary, take the baby, go to Egypt. And don't forget the gold and the frankincense and the myrrh. Again, you can see God moving the pieces around. He's telling them, don't worry about your hotel rooms. Don't worry about your food. You take the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. God will take care of you. Where God guides, He provides. Where He leads, He meets needs. And God leads a wise man from this foreign country that Joseph meets one time and gave Joseph everything he needed. Everything we have, everything that you and I have, comes from the hands of God. Everything we have, everything we own was given to us by Him. All from Him. We own nothing. Ask the dead if they took anything with them to heaven. Someone can say, but I worked for it. Who gave you the health? Who gave you the strength? Who gave you the ability? Who gave you the skill? Who gave you the opportunity? Who gave you the plan? We have what we have by the grace of God. That's the God of Christmas that we celebrate. So Joseph, up to now, tremendous. We don't know how he died and when he died. We know that he didn't live too long. And we don't know a whole bunch of his story. I would have loved to have known more of the story. But here's a nobody, a carpenter. But he stood up. Look what he done, what he did. And I imagine that Joseph at the end of life, he's amazed at what God has done in his life. And the last time that Joseph is mentioned in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is 12 years old. You remember the story. Mary and Joseph take Jesus to the Passover festival. And when they made their way home, they assumed that Jesus was with other family members as they walked back. It took days to discover He's not with us. They discovered He was lost, or they were lost. Somebody was lost, right? And so they turn around and they go back. I don't know if you ever lost a child. We left Lisa for about 10, 15 minutes one time in Laredo by herself. So we know. And he was a little girl. But anyway, you can imagine how they're this is the Son of God. I mean, I could have said it was just Lisa, but this is the Son of God. You cannot lose the Son of God. And so they go back and they find Him with rabbis in the temple. And they're all amazed at what He's saying. Let's look at the last verses that we're looking at today. Luke 2:48 and 49. When His parents saw Him, they were astonished. His mother said to Him, Son, why have you treated us like this? 49? 49. Why were you searching for me? He asked. Didn't you know? I had to be in my Father's house. I had to be in my Father's house. How do you think Joseph felt at that moment when he heard the news? Or when he heard those words, my Father's house. I had to be in my Father's house. Joseph had been you or me, we would have said, excuse me? I put food on the table. I took you under my wing. I put clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and I thought my house was your father's house. But in reality, that never, ever entered into Joseph's mind. He wasn't like that. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't upset when he said, I must be in my father's house. Knowing Joseph, he probably had this big smile on his face because Joseph knew from the time the baby was born that this little boy could call him Dad, but he knew that the real father was the Father in heaven. He knew who the real father was. What an unlikely hero to be willing to stand in the shadows, behind the scenes, out of the limelight, and give all the glory to God. Can't wait to meet Joseph in heaven. Can you imagine coming up to Joseph and you're saying, just say something, any word. Joseph, I know you didn't say anything in the Bible, but say a word here now. Just to hear what your voice sounds. Tell me about your dreams with the angels. Tell me. How was it to be the dad of a son that was not yours? Tell me what it was like to do things that you didn't have to do, but you did. How did you feel when they ridiculed you, illegitimate son? When they laughed at you, son out of wedlock? What was it like to go to Bethlehem and no place to stay, to settle down in Bethlehem? And then the angels will tell you to go to Egypt. What was it like, Joseph? Can't wait to see him. Well, what do you expect him to say? Oh, shucks, right? Unlikely hero. He would say, I just did what God told me to do. And then, we can imagine, right? As I'm talking or as we're talking to Joseph, guess who comes? Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Puts his arm around him. Hi, Dad. Hi, Dad. I love you, Dad. Thanks for what you did and how you did it. Unsung hero. Stayed faithful, stood up, stood strong. And that's what God calls us to do. And so, we can all become heroes. And so today we'll participate in the Lord's Supper. And